Good evening and welcome to Tuesday, November 14, 2017, special meeting of the City Council Successor Agency. This meeting will now come to order. The pledge tonight will be led by Councilman Toma.
Please everyone stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Will the Assistant City Clerk please call the roll of the council?
Councilman Johnson?
Here.
Councilman Toma?
Here.
Councilman Wu?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Spence?
Here.
Mayor Warshaw?
Here. Mr. City Manager, are there any changes to tonight's agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are no changes to tonight's agenda.
Thank you. We'll now move forward with oral communications. Anyone wishing to speak is asked to complete a yellow card if you wish to come to the podium and speak. If you just wish to express either being opposed or for a particular item, you can fill out one of the orange cards, which I don't have one. Assistant City Clerk, do you have an orange card there so you can...
They look just like Mr.
Great.
Grivich does.
And if you fill out the orange card, please give that to the Assistant City Clerk. If you at some point decide to speak before that, please fill out a yellow card and you will be given the opportunity to speak. When you come up to the mic, you will have 5 minutes. Please speak directly into the mic so that not only everyone in the audience can hear you, but also the public that is watching.
Mr. Mayor,
yes.
If I may add, the items for oral communication are for items 2 and 3 on the agenda. Item 1 we are hearing separately.
Thank you. I have 2 speaker cards. Actually, both of them are on number 1. We'll wait until we get to item 1. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on item 2 or item 3? If not, I will close the public comment section, and we will now move on to the public hearing. Which is item number 1. Item number 1 is set for public hearing. It consists of an opportunity to receive input from the community regarding selection of a district map for district-based city council elections. This is the 5th public hearing held regarding the creation of city council district boundaries. Will the city clerk verify that proper legal notice has been given?
So verified.
Thank you. At this time, I shall open up the public hearing. All persons who desire to speak will have an opportunity to speak during the public comment portion of this hearing. First, we will have the staff presentation and then move to the public comment portion. Mr. City Manager, who will present the staff report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our City Attorney, Kimberly Hall-Barlow, as well as our Deputy City Manager, Laura Minnick, will give that report.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the Council. This will be the 5th public hearing that you have held regarding the selection of districting maps. The first 2 related to criteria that the public felt important in the formation of the districts. This 3rd public hearing and the 2 that preceded it related to the selection of the map or plan for the districts that have been presented to you. As you know, the law requires that every map be considered at least 2 public hearings, and that every map also be available at least 7 days prior to the public hearings. All the maps that you narrowed your consideration to are up on the wall. Maps 106, 111, 114, 115, 117, and 120. Those maps were selected by you last week at the fourth public hearing as those maps which you wanted to remain a consideration of. So this evening, we are asking for, once you've heard all the public input, for you to either select a map that would then be attached to the proposed ordinance, and we can talk about that if you have questions, and or if you want to change any of those maps or take further input, we would schedule a new public hearing for that purpose. We do have Shalise from the demographics, thank you, DNC, here to answer questions about the maps, and we also will be asking you, once you have selected a map, to designate the order in which these districts will go up for election. And we have data about that, but that has to be held until we have had you select a map for us. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Council, do you have any questions?
Would you like to see the maps up again? They're all up there, but we can have Shalise go through a presentation if you like.
No, I don't think we're going to
Okay.
need that.
Very
Thank
good.
you. So with that, I shall move to the public comment portion of the public hearing. And our first speaker will be Elsie Messman, and Elsie will be followed by Armando Sanchez.
Mayor, council, staff, and everyone here tonight. My only thing is I like the north-south because I think you're representing a bigger portion of the city. You're not a gob here and a gob here and gob here. You're not getting the whole area sort of thing. So I would like to see on the map 120 where it goes north and south. And I think that would give all the councilmen that are running a fair chance, and they know what's on one side of the city and the other. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Armando Sanchez, and Armando will be followed by Jerry Patras.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. Thank you, residents of the city and staff. I'm liking map 111, only because I've been there. Actually, my name's Armando Sanchez, resident of West Covina, 24 years, Navy veteran, hospital corpsman, orthotech for Kaiser for 18 years. You know, I'm looking at 111 because it's going to hold that person accountable. I had an accident in front of my house about 4 weeks ago. I called dispatch because the lady was terrified. Her kid was shocked. The other guy's airbags imploded. So both cars were not drivable. And the dispatch person, this was on October the 14th around 5 o'clock. You know, she goes, nobody heard it? I goes, no, they just need somebody here to, you know, maybe make a report, get a tow car, because both these cars are not going to go anywhere. And the first thing out of her mouth, nobody's hurt, they're responsible for their own tow charges. And I'm like, that's not what I want to hear. And an hour later, the police showed up with tow trucks, three tow trucks. We only needed two. And, you know, it was just, and that's not the single incident. I had my car stolen. They responded 45 minutes. This was in '04. My neighbor's kid did a fast one on his parents about 10 years ago and disappeared and thought he was going to meet his grandparents. They weren't there at where he thought. The mom was running scared, came to every neighbor. The sheriffs responded in 2 minutes, had a cop chopped her up in the air in 5 minutes, and the West Covina PD was there about 10 minutes after the sheriff said. So it's just like my little section down there in the green is really forgotten. So if we go vertical, I don't know how much better that's going to be in crime response or help or fire department. I mean, Station 61 is real close. I would love to go to, I mean, there's an officer right there who'd take his badge away and he'd have to be a sheriff, but I would love to go to county services myself and see if we could save money there, if we're looking to save money also. So, that's my pitch on this. I like map 111. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Jerry Patras, and Jerry will be followed by Frederick Sykes.
Thank you, Council. First and foremost, I would like to thank the Council and the staff. You were challenged with this task that I don't know very many people that want, and I really feel that the residents had opportunities for genuine input. It wasn't token input. Thank you. You've heard me before. I'm not going to reiterate too much. I just want to summarize. My views in looking at data is that our population is really diverse. We don't really have pockets. And this is a racial-based lawsuit that is very offensive to everybody I know, okay, and it's upsetting. The more I think about this, the more I've come to understand that my worldview is just not going to fit with people who are divisive. I am inclusive, and that is the way I see West Covina. I see West Covina as neighbors. In my neighborhood, we have Section 8 and we have six-figure income people all living harmoniously together. And that is what I want to see. We thrive as residents when our business are strong in our community and we have tax incentives and items like that. The problem I have with the ones that have the green down at the bottom is that kind of isolates, and that's just really reflective of a divisive nature and a different worldview. I prefer the verticals because I prefer an integrated, inclusive community where the council members work together and listen to the residents. We have districts, and until the courts change that, that's the reality I'm going to live. My preference is 117 because it brings more districts over the freeway. And I'm concerned about the freeway, the wash, and then the southernmost part of the city. I want to see us just be inclusive. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Frederick Sykes, and Mr. Sykes will be followed by Phil Kaufman.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council, city staff, members of the audience. I am Frederick Sykes, 40-year resident of West Covina, and I have been a strong supporter of districts since about 2007. Now, we have these maps that are on the viewer here, and I don't appreciate any of them simply because we have a big dividing line between them. Most districts have the freeway running through them, and that breaks up cohesion and makes it difficult for folks to communicate and converse about their concerns. So when three of our council members live near each other, and yet with these districts, the way they're drawn, each council member has this, possibly has its own district. That's a problem. When we have districts that are drafted with long lines, with a bunch of squiggly lines, that's gerrymandering. Same thing with putting three council members that live close together in their own district, that's gerrymandering. When you have voting districts that are designed so that you can keep power, that is gerrymandering. And the CVRA, the description that's given in the CVRA is different than what you have on that board. And then now, We have another issue that I want to bring to bear here. We have a person on the council that appears to thrive on redefining, which is another way of not telling the truth. At this last council meeting, the Mayor Pro Tem tried to define the efforts that I've been bringing forth about districts as a power grab. The bottom line is, long before I ran for office, I worked for voting districts. And voting districts, to me, is just a way of being fair. When you go back to the night of 2011 when I was elected, before the election was over, every council member lived in and around the area of the country club. And the idea about districts is to move away from that concentration of control of the city from one part of town. Districts was an effort to try to make sure that this would never happen again, with one area of town having control of every seat on the council. If you have 5 compact districts, the first thing you're going to get is an area of town where people have never been represented very well on the city council, and that's the far southwest section of the city council. You would get a guarantee that all 5 would come from all over the city. You would guarantee that all 5, that in this city of 17 square miles, when you have established districts, when shots are fired, when there is a foul odor or some other alarming situation in your community, when you have 5 districts, then wherever that situation is, that council member is going to hear it, feel it, smell it, because he's embedded in the community. But when you have things the way we are with these lines that you're about to establish here, all we have left is a fight with the court, because it's not the CVRA. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Phil Kaufman, and Phil will be followed by Alfred Williams.
Good evening. I also would like to thank council, staff, consultants, and most of all our residents for all the long hours and hard work that has been put into this project, especially in light of the fact that so many people really oppose the entire concept, but to the large part put that aside to come up with a plan in the best interests of the city as a whole and all of our residents. After all the public hearings we've had, all the community meetings, there's nothing new that can come up or be said tonight as far as I can tell. But I would like to go over a couple of key points and put in a plug for MAP 115. There are economic enclaves and there are community of interests all through our city. And as I've said before, I see the Interstate 10 freeway as an artificial barrier, not creating or hurting any type of community of interest either above or below the freeway. And I think, as many people have mentioned over the past several months in various hearings, what we don't want is something akin to the gerrymandering that's been done across the country and in our community, such as appears to be the case in supervisorial districts. You know, that's one prime district division that was done that's been brought up many times about how, you know, one supervisor could have a district that extends for hundreds of miles. I see the same type of thing, basically gerrymandering in trying to create districts go from one end of the city to the other end of the city for the sole purpose of crossing the freeway and going to the bottom tip of the city. I see that as contrived and something that's really unnecessary. think we need to focus on those community of interest within various portions of the city, not trying to extend or say that those communities of interest extend far beyond their actual borders. In map 115, I think I have devised a division where there are economic interests in each of the divisions. Most of my districts go below and above, or at least border on the freeway. And what's been mentioned many times, I think, is an important issue, and I'll say it one last time, I hope one last time, is that 115 is the only map that divides the downtown civic center and mall area into not one, but rather 3 districts, where the majority of council members will have a direct interest in the most important economic, cultural, and governmental portion of the city. And I think that's something that needs to be recognized and not ignored in order to choose an alternate plan that's sole purpose seems to be to create what I see as contrived gerrymandered districts that have to go for no other reason than to do it from as far south as the city goes to as far north as the city goes. I think, again, 115, I think, takes into account the most important dynamics of our community, and I would urge council to adopt 115.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Alfred Williams, and Alfred will be followed by Bruce Leinbach.
Good evening, council. I guess you all know that I have been against the vertical districts because everyone keeps saying that, yeah, you're making it more whole or whatever. We keep saying we're dividing the city. I'm not dividing any city or anybody. The districts is not dividing the city. It's putting boundaries on a council member. I question one of the maps which you have up there, which is 117, because I think Mr. Grivich, I think if I'm pronouncing his name right, got up and he said within one of the meetings that one of the main portions of his map was that it maintained each one of you council members within a district. And that is illegal per not only the CVRA, but that's not a true reason for drawing up districts. And I have to admit, I don't have a map up there. I wanted to be as impartial as I could be, and still, so I didn't create a map. But I keep wondering why we want vertical districts. Why couldn't we have, and I brought this up before, we could have had east-west districts. I mean, they would have accomplished the same thing if that's what you wanted to do. Why none of our demographic consultants map even made it close to being in? None of you even seem to have considered it. I don't know why that was. Also, you didn't ask the one thing that you, especially Mr. Washout pointed out with Singpoli, is you didn't come up and bring you didn't listen to our demographics people and says, which one of these maps most meet the requirements of the court and the CVRA? Have they even done anything to even match those maps up and see how they meet the requirements, and attempt to meet the requirements? And also, why the demographics for maps, green, yellow, purple, were never even considered at all? That's the only opinion I have about this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Bruce Leinbach, and Bruce will be followed by John Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council. I think I turned my card in at like third. Now I'm at the bottom of the deck. Must be not popular. First of all, one of the most important questions that should be answered, you got all these districts up there, you got 6 of them. Which, do we have councilmen, is every councilman that, where they live now, are they all involved in that, or do we change around? I know where you vaguely live, but to go up there, and I know where Mr. Spence lives, but I don't know if it's a light blue or whatever, but does everybody up there, if you select one, is somebody going to be excluded from that selection as far as where they live now? I guess that the only way they won't be excluded because all they have to do is sell their house and buy a house in the new district. So you can do it that way, but that's generally, logically, that doesn't happen too often. So you got all these maps up here, but I can't tell if Mr. Wu, Mr. Warshaw, are they both on that? Or Mr. Spence, Mr. Johnson, are they both on that? Or how it's going to be handled? But can anybody answer that? Is all the councilmen on all these different maps or proposals, are all of them going to be fitted into each one that's been proposed? Can you answer that question or not? Or I guess I can't answer questions.
We'll answer questions after public comment.
Okay. That's what I want to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is John Shoemaker, and John will be followed by Cesar Cervantes.
Let's start off by saying that anybody who gets up here and says this isn't about power in some way, shape, or form is lying. It's that simple. Every one of you might have, one of the reasons you got here was because you'd have the power to shape the city in a way that you thought people want it to be. You know, what really puzzles me about this is one person gets up here and says it's about representation, that one part of the city has ruled and it's been unfair. But what puzzles me to no end is when that person was on that dais and had the opportunity to nominate somebody who lived on the north side, who lived on the south side, who lived in the east, or who lived in the central, picked people who lived in South Hills. Picked people who lived in South Hills. And they get up here over and over again and say it's about representation and how dare South Hills always rules. Well, there must be something that if the people he nominated and the people he voted for lived in South Hills, he must have felt they were eminently qualified to serve on the council. But it's okay for him to have that conclusion, but it's not okay for the voters to have that conclusion. I'll tell you right now, I know of nobody who, the three of you live in what's called the South Hills area, voted for you because of where you lived. They voted for you because of what your philosophy was and what you said you tried to do for the city. They didn't say, oh, he lives in South Hills, I got to vote for him. Well, maybe people vote for folks in South Hills because they run successful businesses. They've served in the military and been part of successful businesses. Work for the government and make decisions all the time and like the philosophy. Whatever the case may be, like your record on the school board. Well, sorry, you don't live in South Hills. But God knows that the way it keeps getting changed, you might be living in South Hills pretty soon. You know, I remember when I moved into the city in 1990, South Hills basically was right along the hills. And then magically it moved to all the way down to Azusa and the freeway. So, you know, next election you'll probably be in South Hills now too. But, you know, what you need to do, no matter how you do this, somebody's going to complain, somebody's not going to like it. You know, when I drew the map that I drew, I didn't take into account where anybody was, just kind of drew it. Said, you know, what's the populations? What are the things that would make people pay attention? like you said, like was said earlier, well, if there's a smell, you'll have, out of BKK, you'll have a council member who'll be jumping all over it. Well, when I look at the way some of these maps draw north and south, there's going to be 3 council members who will be jumping all over it, whether they live there or not. Because there's people down there who I want their vote. So you're going to pay attention to it. So, I'm not sure, as I was saying, this is about power. This is about having a position in some people's mind. Some come onto the council because they want to serve and help the city. Some have other reasons. I don't know what the reasons are in your heart, so I take you at your word. You're trying to do what you feel is best for the city that you were elected to serve. Sometimes you're right, sometimes you're not, but then who's 100% right all the time anyway, right? So, I look at it when I see some of you, it's probably a detriment to you personally and business-wise to serve on the council, and you still do it. I'll give you credit for that. So whatever decision you make tonight, whether somebody wants to sue or not, that's what you're going to have to do, and we'll take it from there, and we'll live with it. And if we don't, a bunch of us, enough people don't like it, there'll be somebody else who'll do it, and we get to do it again, in probably 2021 or 2022 after the census. So have fun tonight.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Cesar Cervantes, and Cesar will be followed by Dana Sykes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, distinguished council members, staff, and members of the public. My name is Cesar Cervantes, and I'm also a citizen over here of the city of West Covina. Everybody has basically expressed their personal feelings about this issue. I'm here to basically remind you why we're here today. It's about representation. It's about diluting votes in some of these maps. People are saying that you need to do what's best for the city. Well, you need to do what's best for the city. And what's best for the city is not to select a map that is going to take us back to court. I live in South Hills. So it's not that I'm in the South or I'm whatever. So bottom line, again, let's just do what's best for the city. Don't vote with your feelings. Vote with your mind. And let's don't go back to court. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Dana Sykes, and Dana will be followed by Jim Grivich.
Good evening. Well, congratulations, gentlemen, on passing the Republican course on how to gerrymander districts. North to South districts do not address the problems prevalent to the area. That does not make it inclusive, it makes it irrelevant. So if you got 3 councilmen that live north, if they're representing people on down, they're not in my neighborhood. They're not seeing the traffic problems on AMR. They're not seeing, for instance, when I drive along between Azusa and Valinda on AMR, all the potholes, which, by the way, I know where they are now, so I can move my car around so I don't hit them. That's a constant problem. I don't know about potholes in the north part of the city. I don't live there. That's why it's important to have districts that are inclusive and cohesive, not spaghetti. To have a power grab, you need to have the ability to grab power. Part of the reasons for districts is most residents cannot afford to run a citywide election. That is why districts are important. I've heard people say, well, if the South Hills can run, well, no offense, many of you have more means to finances or more ability to be able to gather those finances. Councilman Johnson and my husband are the rare, and I do mean rare, examples of people that ran with little to no money. And that was because we were out in the streets daily. So it's not a pox on anybody else spending money, it's just the facts. and that's the problem with that. Mayor Warshaw talked about NIMBY at the last meeting. Well, he was talking about Singpoli, and the problem I had with that comment was the fact when there was radio towers going to be going up on the eastern end of the city. I believe they were going to be in the county area of in between Walnut and the city. You didn't like that. You didn't want that in your neighborhood. Well, as someone who lives in an area that's going to be severely impacted by the Singpoli project, I am concerned about it because I don't know much about it, which many residents are in the dark about. I already have problems with traffic on Azusa Avenue. So adding more into the mix with only one entrance and exit just sounds crazy. And that is coming from someone who will have to deal with it. If you're living north, if my councilman's north of the freeway, they're not going to be experiencing those traffic problems. Someone that lives there would be, and they would understand it when they maybe even be able to offer a solution to the problem because they live there. That's what makes cohesiveness important, because they have a perspective that someone that doesn't live in the area will not have. And that is especially important for the area down in the southwest of the city. I've walked door to door in that area when I was doing districts. I had people literally calling their neighbors, telling them, she's coming over right now. Before I even they opened the door, they're like, here, give it to me, I want to sign it. Unfortunately, that area doesn't vote. Why? Because they don't feel that their vote counts. That's, again, another reason why it's important to have representation. One last comment, since I do have a little bit of time. When it comes to Singpoli, I was disturbed when
you need to stick to, we're off the other public comments. It's only if it's on districting.
No, this is just a little bit too.
It's on districting.
Well, the comment I wanted to make was when the councilman berated a resident and none of you stopped him. That's because he was taking affront to it. That's not what residents should have to put up with. We're expressing our opinions, and if it's different than yours, that's the way it should be. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jim Grivich.
I'm Jim Grivich. I wasn't originally planning on speaking tonight, but somebody mentioned my name, and they misquoted me, so I felt obligated to get up and say what I really said. And I would advise the person to look at the videotape of the meeting if they want to know what I really said. Specifically, at an early meeting, quite a while ago, I got up and spoke about map 106 and said that I suggested the council consider it because in that map, each of the council members, current council members, would have their own seat. However, subsequently, at the last council meeting last week, I reported that I had changed my advocacy, that I felt 117 was a better map because it represented better the economic interests of the city driven by Interstate 10. And so that we set the record straight on what I actually said, I wanted to say that tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. That is the last speaker card that I have. Is there anyone else wishing to speak? If not, I will close the public comment portion of this hearing. And I will now open it up to council discussion. Prior to that, did you want to make any comments about anything that was said, our city attorney?
Yes. I think the city attorney has a comment regarding Mr. Leinbach's comments.
Yes, I do. Thank you. Mr. Leinbach, the information about where council members live is publicly available, but they have specifically been prevented from considering either their own residents or the residents of any past or future potential candidate in selecting the district boundaries. And so that is the reason that you don't see their residences shown on these maps. Once they select a map, We will have to do a different analysis for purposes of the settlement agreement that will be about where different representatives have come from over the last 10 years. And we will then show you that map that shows the last 10 years worth of electeds, where they have been from, so that the council can select at least one of the three least represented, or one of the two least representative as one of the three that will go up for election in 2018.
Thank you. I do have one question for our consultant. Do any of these maps not meet the requirements for districting?
In our opinion, all the maps. I didn't press it hard enough, I'm sorry. Shalice Tilton with NDC, which is National Demographics Corporation, and in our opinion, all 6 of the maps meet the criteria of the CVRA.
Thank you very much. Councilman Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, I sat here and I listened to the residents tonight, and each of them that decided on a map, not 2 of them picked the same one. We had 4 residents got up there, and one had 115, one had 120, one had 111, and one had 117. So our residents themselves weren't sure exactly. They had what they liked, but it is what it is. Myself, I've looked at all of them, and I've studied them all. And like I said at the last meeting, the one I like the best out of all of them, I like 120. I think what it does, it keeps the council members in touch with the whole city. We could have went east and west, and to me, that separates the councilman. That puts them in an area by themselves, and that they don't even have to go down to the other part of the city. Here, they have to. They have to go from one end of the city to the other end of the city. They have to stay in touch with the residents. And their border line is going to run next to the border of another district. That means they have to be concerned what goes on in that district. And then that one has to be concerned on what goes in the other district. So I like it this way because a council member can represent the whole city with their district. And like I say, we're in compliance with it. So my concern is I like 120. I think that will suit us the best.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Spence.
Yeah. First of all, I have to say I'm offended that someone believes that the response time of our officers is based on where you live and what part of the city you live in. And I met with the chief today, and I have a hard time believing the chief or our officer say, we're not going to respond to that because it's in this part of town. I really have to publicly rebuke that thought because I don't believe that happens. I don't believe they say, we can't go to that part of town. I don't believe our police officers do that. I have a hard time believing that. I think people are confused about the CVRA from what I'm hearing, because I read the text of the CVRA, and the CVRA doesn't talk anything about north-south districts. It doesn't talk about, even the word compact is not in it. That's all about the standard for being able to sue to overturn at-large districts. And that is all based on race. That's not based on areas of representation. So I think there's some confusion about that. We haven't been to court on this issue. I wish we had. I wish we had put this to the voters, so the voters could have had a say into this as well. As far as the timeline, since someone called me a liar, this is the only timeline that I know that's confusing to me, is that in 2009, we rejected districts that were drawn with the help of Mr. Sykes, the city did. In 2011, we know from the bills that the taxpayers paid for that he was meeting with lawyers that sued us later on CVRA, that's 2011. He got elected in 2011. On January 21st, 2014, there was a vote to oppose a proposed bill by Roger Hernandez that would mandate going to districts in cities over 100,000. And that vote was 5-0. On 3/18/2014, there was a vote to oppose the specific bill, AB 1980, to oppose being forced to go to districts if you were over 100,000. And that vote was 5-0. And then I know somebody lost an election in 2015, and then suddenly the lawsuit's back on with the lawyers, and we're paying for those meetings. People can say what they want about it. But I just know that's the timeline. Those are specific votes. Those are specific things that we have documentation of. I'm still where I was last meeting. We're supposed to vote on what's in the best interest of the city. None of these maps are. This has been the most divisive thing to come to West Covina since I've been on the council. There's been so many personal attacks of people all over the place on this. It's been tearing communities apart. The activist people that come to this, I think most people don't even know what's going on. They're going to find out when suddenly they don't get to vote. They're going to find out, what? That's a whole different issue, because I think this whole process is going to lead to, while the turnout might be higher in elections, participation is going to be less, because it's going to be hard to do candidate forums, where there's only going to be 1 or 2 districts up, and you don't know how many people are going to be running in those. It's going to be hard to focus on all the interests of the city at those candidate forums, because people are going to be focused on a district. So I think there's going to be less participation, unfortunately, in the process. And something that happened in 2013 will never happen. It will be very difficult to happen where you have a sudden shift in the way the city's operated. That will be very difficult under this kind of plan. I do know, as far as the north-south thing, as I pointed out last meeting, that Assembly District 55 has South Hills Country Club in it and Shadow Oak Park. So the nonpartisan redistricting commission thing, they had no problem combining those things as a community of interest. I think people don't understand the CVRA and what they think they're going to sue on, because CVRA is all about race and the racial makeup of the districts. And so, but I'm still where I'm at. If I'm going to do what's best for the city, we shouldn't be doing this. This is wrong. This is just fundamentally wrong. It's going to be fundamentally bad for the city. And, I just don't see myself voting for a map still. I just don't see how I can do that. And it doesn't matter where people live. By the way, CVRA does not cover where people live. Actually, most cities do take into account where people live when they did this. But we, because we did a settlement agreement, agreed not to do that. It had nothing to do with CVRA. That's the reason we're not looking at that stuff. And so I know it seems counterintuitive, because politicians love to draw the lines, to benefit, themselves and so forth. But I just don't see how participating in this is beneficial to the city.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? No? I'll go ahead then. So do I believe in districting? No. Actually, I think the law is wrong, but that's just my opinion. Do I like any of these? No. I didn't like any of the 20, but it doesn't matter. There was a lawsuit, and I was unwilling to spend somewhere between $3 and $5 million. I think it was even wrong to think about spending that kind of money. And to date, still no one's won. That being said, we have done a settlement, and we have to pick a map. You just heard tonight from the consultant that any of these will fit. The interesting thing is, once a district's picked, you'll only vote once for that particular district. Because in 2022, after the 2020 census, we will pick new districts. Who's ever on the council will have to go with new districts because the population shifts. So during that time, you'll have one election, because you won't be voting every 2 years. You'll now be voting every 4 years. That's a problem, I think, with districting. You have a less of a chance to pick your candidates. And I can't really believe that anyone thinks that anyone on this council is going to do something that's good for one district and bad for another. That is just wrong. All 5 of us are here to do what we feel is best for the city, not an individual, not a particular area. But I guess some people feel that way. With that, if I have to pick a map, I like 117, so I'll make a motion for 117. Do I have a second? Motion dies for lack of a second. Yes.
I'm not planning to say anything, but since most of people say something, so I want to give my 3 cents. And I say so many times, my background has a chance to be elected at large, meaning everybody has a chance, okay, with my background. As long as you work hard. People say, Tony, you might have some money. Okay, yes, I spend some money for my mailer, but more and less is for door knocking and selling my idea and tell them what I accomplished about this city. So we must have the right candidate and willing to do the top job and sell yourself, and by door knocking, talking to each person, and hopefully they will be willing to vote for you. So what I'm saying is this, okay, I'm so proud to have a chance. The first time around and I get elected to represent entire West Covina. So right now we have to break into the 5 districts. So meaning I will represent only one small district. It's such a non-achievement. Like now I'm just like a village, okay, leader, not entire city. And then in the west side, they have a problem. They're calling me. They Tony, come over here. We some have graffiti problem. I say, sorry, you have to call your rep. I'm not in your district. And this basically, I just take away my burden while they serve entire city. So I really, again, I'm so proud have this chance to serve entire West Covina before I kaput. I hope I can do something that we can make a different change about improve our city. We have a chance. West Covina has so much to offer. We really have a chance to make our city great again. So, okay, it's not Trump, okay, it's, okay. Okay, I'm saying make the city great. Okay, make the city good. Okay, so how we can from all this district map and been discussed so many times. Okay, and what really can to really make a decision. It's easy for me to say forget it. I'm not going to participate this, but I will waste my vote to sitting over here, my diet. So what I can see, what I can best, to choose, since we have to go to district, something I disagree, but hopefully from this, all this map, and since the consultant say all these 6 is so legal, then we really have to choose one map. Now hopefully, I think, my personal belief, that can really help, most of the future city council, not necessarily me, but the future city council, member, they have a chance to serve. Not only serve in his tiny little area, but serving all area, north, south, east, west. Hopefully, he has a chance to represent everybody, not represent, so-called South Hill. I live not too far away from South Hill. I live close by to South Hill High School. But I have nothing to do with South Hill Country Club. Speaking true, I don't think those members like me at all. I don't even play golf. So so in that chance, I just see a bunch of green. It's nice. That's it. I have nothing associated with that area just because I live by. And then I become something connected to the South Hill Country Club. I don't think I even allowed to get in. So my point is if you have to pay the money. That's my point. It's not about something else. But for entire all these 5 map, 6 map, I look around and it's what I think that really has a chance. Then I will choose the map 120. I think 120 maybe has a chance to go to the north and south, and then that will present most of the people. So I want to make a motion to the map 120 to be accepted for this district map.
Mr. Mayor, I'll second that motion.
There's been a motion by Councilman Wu and a second by Councilman Johnson for map 120. Any comment?
I forgot to comment on something else. I wanted to ask the consultants this. How many maps do you normally get when you do this process? Because we had 20, and we had complaints that for some reason we weren't considering maps we hadn't received. So how many maps do you normally get?
20 is more than what we usually receive. And it's a very good turnout. There was a lot of public outreach and a lot of public participation that we normally don't see.
And the timeline we had, is that longer or shorter than most of the cities that do this?
Since January 1st, you've had longer timeline actually than those that started after January 1st. So you've had that advantage, and I will say the city has taken advantage of that and offered to have as many public hearings as necessary, held community meetings, and your participation is excellent.
Thank you.
Any other comment? May I have a roll call vote, please?
Johnson.
Aye.
Spence.
No.
Toma.
No.
Wu.
Aye.
Warshaw.
No. Motion fails 3-2. Do I have any other comment?
Move the orders of the day. I mean,
I'll move for map 115. And I guess I should comment. I commented the last time, so I figured I'd just be repeating myself. But yeah, the only issue is the long, the long maps. I don't have a problem with vertical per se, but I just think that some of the maps with the really long districts just don't fit in terms of the communities of interest. So that I'll move for 115.
Is there a second? Motion dies for lack of a second.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, obviously the council will do what it does. Maybe we move on to the next item of business, but we do have to adopt a map by December 16th. It is done by ordinance, which means we have to have at least 3 affirmative votes in favor of a map for the ordinance. So I just wanted to get that out there.
Thank you. Is there any other comment? I'll make a motion to adopt map 106. Do I have a second? Motion dies for lack of a second. So since it looks like this council can't decide, we
you
need...
didn't do 111. You didn't do 111, right?
If you want to.
Oh, no. I don't want to. I'm just saying you guys didn't try. You guys didn't try.
Since we are unable to decide tonight, we need to schedule another meeting.
Yes, it does not have to be a public hearing unless the council wants to see other maps or consider other maps than the ones that have already been considered. If the council was interested in having changes to any of the maps, we would have to have another couple of public hearings for that. So we could bring this back to your next meeting and try again.
Then we will bring this back at the next meeting if the council concurs, and they do. So with that, we will move on to item number 2, the preliminary fourth quarter financial report. Mr. Freeland, who will present that report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our interim finance director, Nicole Lugatoff, will be making that presentation. And if we can just give her a couple seconds to come down. Also, she does have a brief PowerPoint to go over as well with the community.
Huh? Yeah, but the next meeting is going to be dragged out now. Now the next meeting is going to be dragged out now. Well, that's, I'm thinking we should put it in the December meeting.
Good evening, City Council and members of the public. The preliminary fourth quarter report is being presented to City Council and the public to provide a preliminary status of the city's financials at June 30th, 2017. The general fund's revenue is $64.7 million at June 30th, 2017, which reflects an increase of $5.5 million compared to fiscal year 15-16. The two largest revenue sources in the general fund are property tax and sales tax. Together, these two revenues account for 64% of the general fund's revenues. The largest revenue source, property tax, was higher than anticipated, with $24 million recorded at June 30th, 2017, which reflects an increase of $1.6 million or 7.3% compared to fiscal year 15-16. The next largest revenue source, sales tax, has $16.5 million recorded at June 30th, 2017, and this reflects a decrease of approximately $725,000 or 4.2% compared to fiscal year 15-16. There was also a large increase in the use of money and property revenue, which has $2.7 million recorded at June 30th, 2017. The Department of Finance determined that the advances between the city and the successor agency were an enforceable obligation on the Recognized Obligation Payment Schedule, also known as the ROPS, for fiscal year 16-17, which resulted in the city recording a one-time increase in interest income and the advances owed to the General Fund and the Housing Authority in the amount of $2.3 million and $1.2 million, respectively. And these funds will be paid to the General Fund and the Housing Authority on future ROPS. And this graph is just reflecting the general fund's major revenues compared 6/30/17 and 6/30/16. The general fund expenditures total $66.3 million at June 30th, 2017, which is within the adjusted budget amount of $66.3 million. And this is comparable to the prior year, where 100% of the general fund's annual expenditures were incurred by the end of the fourth quarter. And this slide shows like a graph visual showing the expenditures at June 30th, 16 and June 30th, 17. And this slide is showing the general fund expenditures by category, which is breaking down from the departments to personnel services, materials and supplies, the capital outlay, and transfers out. And then this is just another graph showing the personnel services and the materials and supplies year over year. So as shown in the summary of changes and the general fund balance, the general fund revenues totaled $64.8 million, while the expenditures totaled $66.6 million at June 30th, 2017. The excess of expenditures over revenues resulted in a $1.8 million reduction in fund balance due to City Council's approval of various fund balance appropriations throughout the course of the fiscal year. Even with these additional expenditures, the city's fund balance reserve still meets the city's reserve policy of at least 20% of the general fund's operating expenditures, with a reserve balance of $14.1 million at June 30th, 2017. The $6.98 million in non-spendable fund balance includes prepaids and advances. And the prepaids would include payments the city made prior to June 30th, 2017, but for goods or services incurred during fiscal year 17-18. The advances relate to the advances to the successor agency as well as the Auto Plaza, and these advances will be repaid to the general fund in future years. At the June 22nd, 2017 special budget meeting, staff provided the general fund's expenditures through June 19th, 2017, which was $59 million. At the June 30th, 2017, the total expenditures were $66.3 million, and the $7.3 million difference is due to the following. So there were additional payroll costs that were incurred for a total of $4.3 million. The city paid about $700,000 in invoices from the period of June 20th through June 30th, 2017. And there was also approximately $700,000 charged back to the general fund for various property and liability insurance claims that were settled throughout the course of the fiscal year. Fuel and vehicle maintenance costs were $400,000, which includes allocating the remaining vehicle maintenance fund, Fund 365's expenditures, not included on the monthly vehicle maintenance reports. There was also, in addition, $1.2 million in materials and service costs that were paid from July 1st, 2017 through October 5th, 2017 for services incurred or products received during fiscal year 16-17. So even though the invoices were received and paid during fiscal year 17-18, these costs needed to be recorded in fiscal year 16-17. And this is due to governmental funds being required to report on a modified accrual basis of accounting. So it requires the city to record expenditures when the liability is incurred and not paid. So a couple examples of that would be street sweeping. So if services were incurred in June, but we paid the invoice in July, and same thing with janitorial services, those services were included during June, but we didn't pay the invoice until August. A couple other examples with emergency medical supplies and highly visible yellow jackets. Those were bought and received before June 30th, but we didn't pay those invoices until August and September. So our recommendation is to receive and file the preliminary fourth quarter financial report, and I will take any questions.
Are there any questions of staff from council? I've got a couple questions. So from what I'm looking at here, we went over in two departments, all public safety, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And how much did we go over in each of those?
Let me see. I thought I brought notes for that. I'm not that good at math in my head right now, but I know the percentage, if we look back, let me get back to that slide. Here it's showing the percentage that they went over. If I just had a quick calculator, I can do the math variance for you guys. Sorry about that. So
That's okay.
For the police department, they went over $475,555, and the fire department went over by $656,103.
Thank you. So if I take a look at police and fire, what we're spending, all of our sales tax and all of our property tax would not pay for that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I would say yes.
Okay.
If I may add, just to get clarification on the overages, the police department under, both Chief Faulkner as well as Chief Bell, before Chief Taylor came on board, were meeting their requirements for their budget. They had chargebacks to the general liability account that was beyond their control that we had to reconcile. That is what put their budget over for this company, or for that past fiscal year. Specifically, as we settle any kind of liability issues, that could be, for example, if a squad car, a police car runs into, someone's personal property or another vehicle, and we have to settle that case or pay out the insurance claims, that would be charged back to them at the end of the year. and that makes up that $475,000 difference, and a little bit more than I believe. And then under the fire department, most of that, if not all of that, I think is easily attributed to the overtime costs with the elimination of the SAFER grant and the inability for the city to charge the overtime that we had, significant overtime this past year from the SAFER grant. That went well over the $656,000. So those two items are easy to clarify for the public.
Okay, thank you. The other question I had is that I think the council voted to pay off some bonds early because of the amount we would save. Do you have any idea how many dollars we spent in paying that off?
During fiscal year 16-17, we paid just over $6 million to pay off 5 between bonds and loans and notes.
And those we're paying in advance to lower our costs
Yes.
In future years?
Yes.
So if we hadn't paid those off, we would have made our budget.
Right.
But we would have increased costs over the following years.
Correct.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of staff? Mayor Pro Tem Spence.
Yeah, I want to follow up on Mayor Warshaw's comment, and the answer being the liability stuff as far as that was out of control of them. Do we have a separate, is there a reason we don't have a separate item so that we can, be able to tell like the cost of the liability versus, anything that would have been over budget? Because to me, there's a difference, if they get stuck with some legal settlement that the council approves, right? And then we charge against their budget, oh, you went over budget. That's not fair, I guess, or not accurate. So
you're asking if there's a line item?
Yeah, is there a line item? So that we know that X amount was liability and they didn't go over budget at all in other areas?
Yes, we do have, we track their personnel versus what we have as a 8,000 series, like an allocation, and that's where we can actually identify, if they went over, this is why, and that's how we were able to identify it.
So.
It's because it is broken down in our general ledger.
So how much of it was liability and how much of it was running over budget?
Correct.
So I'm asking.
No, he's asking how much.
How much of it was running over budget and how much of it was just liability?
I would have to run the reports for you, and I can provide that to you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, if you would provide that to us at a future meeting, I'd appreciate it. Are there any other comments from council? If not, this item has been received and we will file it.
Thank you.
And we will now move with item number 3. This report was a request by our Mayor Pro Tem Spence for report regarding parking lot fees in the Civic Center parking lot.
Yeah. And the issue that I'm having here with the paid parking is how we service residents and people that want to do business here at City Hall. I always use the example of hospitals, and of course, I'm more familiar with it again, but, I always say you could tell what, hospitals, who they're there for, based on where people get to park. Doctors get to park closest to everything, right? And so hospitals are there for doctors, patients have to drive around, nurses have to drive around. And, a lot of times government entities are the same way, where we're not as friendly for residents that are coming, people that aren't used to coming to City Hall. And the way we have our parking structured, the report points out that most of the business is done on the second floor. And I'm not sure people know to go to the second floor immediately. When they get here, they probably go down there. And so, the question is, how do we form parking so that it's friendly for people that actually want to do business here in the city and residents, and not have them run around trying to figure out how not to pay a parking fee when they get here. And that's kind of what my problem is. And because the way, if you come down here, it's not clear, how you're going to get service from City Hall at all. And of course there are no, you say there's free parking on the third floor, but that's very difficult for people to figure out. People don't like to park on the third floor. I think we've said that before about other things too, but they don't like to park there. And so, how do we structure our parking so that it's friendly towards the people we're supposed to serve here in the city, rather than have them nickel and dime through the parking process?
Councilman Johnson.
When Mayor Pro Tem brought this up sometime back, we discussed it, for Mother Mayor to come forward. I thought about it, and I think a good compromise would be that if we could take in the front row where the permit parking is by the council, you go 6 stalls over and say, permit parking for city business only 1 hour parking. I think you give 6 stalls right there strictly for them, where they wouldn't have to pay. They get 1 hour for parking there to do any business they want in the city. That's just a compromise. I don't know if I want to go anywhere with that, but that's better what it does. So anyone else that's come up, they want to do stuff at the courthouse, whatever, they can't park there. This is for those strictly coming to do business with the city, in the city right here. Yeah, if it's okay with Mayor Pro Tem Spence, I'd like to make a motion that we issue 6 parking spaces next to where the council, they park, the permit parking only, and whatever the wording has to say. I think the city manager would come up with the wording on it.
Well, I'll second that, but I do think we need to look at the whole process of this. It's very difficult to figure out where you're supposed to go. I mean, if you're coming here and you have no idea where you're supposed to go, I mean, it is hard to figure out.
If I may, Mayor Pro Tem, in the staff report, we are recommending that we're going to be updating signage around the Civic Center as well. And we do include that in the staff report, especially highlighting those over 200 parking spaces that are free for the first 4 hours of your visit here in the Civic Center complex. So we'll be updating signage as well.
I'll second it.
There's a motion that was to assign 6 additional parking spaces next to the city council parking spaces. That would say for city business only for 1 hour. That was moved by Councilman Johnson, seconded by our Mayor Pro Tem Spence. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Johnson?
Aye.
Spence?
Aye.
Toma?
Aye.
Wu?
Aye.
Warshaw?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. With that, this council meeting is adjourned.